So what do we do in the middle of summer when it's hot and sticky and there's tons of things to do, tons of projects to do? Well, here at Non-Toxic Environments, we take questions from the mailbag. That's right. Today we have an episode of Jay and I talking about questions that we are getting from our listeners, from our customers all over the world. And we thought it would be a good idea to start answering some of these questions. So please enjoy the show, and we look forward to getting your questions sent to us via email, andy@degreeofgreen.com, or if you know Jay's email at AFM, please send a note to him as well. Otherwise, sit back and enjoy the show. Hello, folks. Welcome back to Non-Toxic Environments. And this is Andy Pace. Today, I've got Jay Watts with me. Jay, how you doing today?
Andy, I am doing well. We're deep into the summer.
We are.
People are doing their jobs and fixing their homes, and we hope that they're fixing them healthfully. We trust that they are. And sure. In between our podcasts, we get just a flurry of mail.
Right.
People say, "Hey guys, this is what's going on. Help me figure it out."
Right.
And so today I thought it would make some sense for us to kind of go into the emails. I have a few, you probably have a few, and I thought we'd just those listeners who have written, I hope you're listening today. And if you're not, that's okay, because you'll catch us later whenever you go to the podcast. Right. So let me kick it off.
All right.
This is from Janice in Ontario, California, not too far away from us here in San Diego. Janice writes, and she says, "We have old asbestos tiles we want to replace. What's the safest approach in dealing with these tiles, and what recommendations do you suggest for a new floor?" Ooh.
Well, I've got many suggestions for a new floor, but
yeah, I was going to say that's part of the fun part of the discussion.
Right. So many new products on the market.
Yep.
So many healthy materials. Obviously, the website's full of them, but yep. I'll say that without more detail, I really can't answer that question fully. These asbestos tiles was okay. It's Ontario, California, so I'm assuming it's slab on grade. It's not a basement,
right?
What's this room designed to do? Is it a bathroom, a laundry room, a family room, kitchen? So, the flooring material I'd recommend would come down to what is being done on that floor and what type of abuse does it get. But the bigger part of the question, I think, or the more difficult part of the question would actually be, what's the safest approach to dealing with the asbestos tiles?
Right. I think that's usually first and foremost. And you're right. A lot of times when people write us, they kind of give a real kind of sketchy, basic question.
Right.
And as you just pointed out, there's a lot of different things that we would need to know in terms of making a recommendation that makes sense.
For sure.
So I think initially you're right. In California here, pretty much everything's slab on grade.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, what room is this?
Right.
What are we doing in there?
Right.
So, but let's deal with just this abatement stuff. So we got asbestos tile. We all know that people don't want to breathe asbestos fibers. That's the real problem with the asbestos. And taking it up, depending on how well the job was done, can be a pretty daunting task.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because they basically
can be. And so here's the thing about asbestos tiles.
Yeah.
Eventually somebody's going to have to deal with it.
Right.
Whether it's you, the next owner of the home, the next owner of the home, or the company that is dismantling the home to rebuild. Mm-hmm. Somebody has to deal with the asbestos. And so it all comes down to whether or not you want to kick the can down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Because quite honestly, if that asbestos tile is in good shape, it's not fraying, it's not cracked, there's no concern about the asbestos fibers getting loose, you can just go over the top of it with another flooring material.
Right.
Uh, One of the things about asbestos tile that made it so good, I'll say, as a product, we all know how bad asbestos is, and the fact that it causes cancer.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, there are some positives of that material. Asbestos is unaffected by moisture.
Right.
So think about how flooring manufacturers now are touting these luxury vinyl plank floors and cork floors and even some hardwood floors that are now waterproof. Well, folks, waterproof flooring has been around since the 40s. It's called asbestos tile. So asbestos tile, if it's intact, and again, in good shape, it's actually a really good underlayment for other flooring materials because, it moisture will go through it, will not affect the bond. You have to put a vapor barrier over it and then a floating floor over that. If you don't want to kick the can down the road and you feel like you want to deal with it, then the first thing to do is get in touch with your local municipality, talk to somebody in their building inspection department, find out what can be done. Sometimes you'll have to hire a professional company to actually remediate it. In other parts of the country, you could probably do it yourself and even dispose of it in your garbage or pickup recycling, but you have to do it certain times of the year. Asbestos is, at least here in Wisconsin and other parts of the country, they've allowed us to dispose of it in our weekly garbage pickup, provided that the temperature is like below 40 degrees. It has to do with what becomes airborne at certain temperatures.
Interesting.
So check with professionals, check with your municipality, and then just kind of check yourself. Do you want to take care of it and be done with it and have that peace of mind? Or is it in shape where, we'll just go over it and we'll have flooring over for 20 years and maybe we'll deal with it or somebody else will afterwards.
Sure. The other feature I think with asbestos is it was a fire retardant in a way. So fast asbestos, sprayed as a coating on roofs and ceilings, and that was a popular trend, and especially in big high-rise buildings.
It was used as insulation around boilers and pipes,
right.
Again, so many uses for it, but they found out the hard way how dangerous it was.
Yep.
And it's interesting. I think of that quite often. My mother-in-law passed away because of mesothelioma, cancer caused by asbestos. And asbestos has something like a 50 to 70 year incubation period in the body before it ever shows up as a cancerous tumor.
Wow.
So it turned out that she probably inhaled some asbestos because she used to do the wash for her family when she was a kid. And her dad worked for a boiler company. And he was also in the Navy in World War II. And those naval ships were loaded with this.
Yeah.
And so she would do the laundry, and she picked it up doing the laundry.
Wow.
We don't know. And so this makes me think of, the situation we're in today with just consumer goods and building materials. We've talked about this before. There's 90,000 chemicals used in the production of consumer goods and building materials, yet we only know the toxicological effects of about 3%.
Right.
So we don't know what's going to hurt us later on. So this is why we always strive for asking as many questions now as we can.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't know the long-term effect.
Exactly.
As you just pointed out, there are short-term effects, and then there's the ones that we don't know about that sneak up on us over time, and wham, and then it's like, what the heck happened? Well, that's an excellent answer, Andy. Janice, I hope that helped you on yours. But it leads me to the next one, which I think is kind of topical. As you were talking about how asbestos was good at water, abating water and resistance to water. So this comes from Danielle in Fort Worth, Texas, and Danielle asks, our house is at the bottom of our street, which sees a lot of water during the year. A lot of water during the year. I'm guessing whenever the rainy season is or spring or something. Anyway, she doesn't say, but during the year.
Right.
We want to convert our basement into an office, but we have concerns about moisture intrusion. Would you share your wisdom on how to move forward? Much thanks.
Now,
Moisture
that's a
intrusion.
great question.
Yeah,
And
isn't
it's
that a good
also
one?
somewhat timely because
Yes.
I had a client in California, going back to the last customer
Yeah.
question. I
Yeah.
had a client in California who I actually just handed off to a friend of mine out there who also does building biology and inspections and so forth, because I need boots on the ground in California and I can't do it from here.
Yeah, sure.
But there was a house that has a crawl space.
Mhm.
And when there are heavy rains, they notice that there's water is going down into the crawl space.
Mm.
But there hasn't been heavy rains for a while.
No.
The concrete overflow channel that's near their home is dry, but they have an elevated moisture level inside of their home in the rooms above exactly where this water could come in if it does come in.
Hmm.
And so moisture is an issue for a lot of people. I would say 3 out of every 4 clients that I deal with now are dealing with the ramifications of excess moisture, whether it's mold, whether it's excessive off-gassing, damage of property, so forth.
Right. Degradation of surfaces, that kind of thing.
And so here's what I'd suggest. Find out, was the home built to have a livable lower level? And you may ask yourself, well, what do you mean livable? Well, folks, when homes started being built with basements, they were used for a couple of things: mechanicals, storage, and root cellars. Basements built prior to the 2000s, homes were rarely built with basements that had proper waterproofing to allow that lower level to be a comfortable, healthy, livable space. Yet we all know, especially now when the cost of construction is so high, that we're all trying to regain square footage in our homes to be used for other things. In the basement, it's like all this square footage, what is it being used for? Storage. So why don't I fix it up and I'll finish it and I'll turn it into a rec room or offices, bedrooms, what have you. And you can do a lot on the inside to make it really comfortable, really aesthetically pleasing. But you can't go back unless you dig up your foundation, excavate all the way around your home and put in new waterproofing. You can't go back in and put in fresh waterproofing very easily.
No.
So find out, was the home built with waterproofing? And I'm not just talking a damp proofer. Most homes built with basements, the basement is before you backfill. So you either pour concrete or building block.
Mm-hmm.
On the outside of that, the contractor will spray on a coat of this black, it's called asphalt cutback material. It's essentially a mixture of tar and diesel fuel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called damp proofing. And what damp proofing does is when you backfill, moisture that's in the backfill won't just automatically soak into the foundation. Well, during the backfill process, a lot of this gets kind of scratched and scraped because of the aggregate that's in the backfill. And eventually you'll have all these voids where moisture can get through, and this material starts to break down. It's estimated that damp proofing starts to break down about the 6-month period.
Mm.
So in about 6 months of after building your home and moving in, your basement is no longer watertight, never really was before. And so if you're going to start finishing it, find out what was the waterproofing used. Find out, do you have moisture vapor coming into that basement? How do you know if you don't see it? You got to do calcium chloride tests. You have to do moisture tests, whatever you need to do to determine whether or not you've got vapor that's moving in and out of those walls. So look at that. I would say in most situations, I don't like building out basements into livable spaces unless you know for sure it was designed to be a livable space.
I think that's exactly right. You could waste a lot of money if you don't have that basic information figured out. The other real simple test that people can do for moisture intrusion is just, take a square and tape up some clear plastic over a space.
There you go.
And, surround it with tape around all sides so it can't leak out, and just watch what happens and see if you get condensation on the inside of that.
Yep.
That's a real easy one. Doesn't cost
very easy, very inexpensive. You can even speed it up by putting a hot lamp on it.
Yep.
You'll know usually within 24 hours if there's condensation on the underside of that plastic, or if the concrete in that area starts to look a little darker.
Right.
You'll know that there's constant vapor pressure pushing through that concrete, whether it's on the floor or the walls. So imagine putting down flooring, putting up drywall. Imagine what's happening. You're blocking that.
Yeah.
Where's it going to go? What is it going to do?
So, Andy, give me your take on this, because, people ask us, I can't do all that stuff, or I got moisture problems, but I just can't deal with it. Right.
Yeah.
What do I do? Is there a coating on the inside that can help deal with it? And I'm just wondering, out there in the world, we know probably the most popular product we mentioned is called Drylok.
Correct.
And it's been around forever, and it's been sold as a moisture protection.
Right.
However, it does have its limitations. If too much pressure's on there, it's not going to work either. But I mean, generally speaking, do you think for someone who's kind of in a position where they have to do something, that's worthwhile spending money on a product like Drylok or something similar to it? I think it's just pushing the can down the road in a bad way.
That is possible. I think that every situation is a little bit different.
Yeah.
If, let's say, for instance, it's a poured concrete wall.
Yeah.
And it's actually in really good condition. There's not a lot of visible cracking to it, but you do know you have vapor transmission. Drylok is a good choice in this situation, provided that you don't already have paint on the walls.
Right. It's got to be raw.
It's got to be a raw concrete or a raw block.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what is Drylok? Drylok is a paint made by a company called UGL. I don't sell it. You can buy it at the big box stores.
Correct.
Comes in either a solvent-based version or a water-based version. Yes, use the water-based version. Yes. Even after that, I recommend a coat or two of the AFM exterior paint over it to keep it from off-gassing. But what Drylok is what's called a negative side waterproofer. So the positive side is going to be the exterior of the foundation. This is what the dirt gets pushed against. So this is what you want to do during construction. You want to put a waterproofing system on the outside. You can either do a liquid system, a membrane system, a peel and stick, even a rigid plastic material that used to be called Plotin. I believe now it's called Super Seal. These work wonderfully. If that wasn't done, now you have to look at doing what's called a negative side. So it's on the negative side of the pressure, but what it does, it's what's called a capillary waterproofer. It as it dries on the surface, it creates like this microcrystalline structure within the concrete. It's going to contain a series of silicates that will react with the free lime in the concrete and create this crystalline structure to essentially be a barrier against vapors pushing through it. This is what Drylok is. This is what a product called Zypex is, which is used a lot in commercial construction. These products do work unless you have cracking. If you have cracking, they don't bridge cracks.
Yep.
And so for the cracks, and this is where you had mentioned before, Jay, you might be kicking the can down the road a little bit. Well, if you put Drylok over your entire wall and you've got a pretty serious crack in there, where's all the moisture going to go? right through the crack.
Yep.
Right. Because it'll find the path of least resistance.
Correct.
And so then you end up using what's called a hydraulic cement or a hydraulic patch to patch up that area. And at that point, you're thinking to yourself, well, why do I have such a moisture problem to begin with?
Right.
And then you're going back to, well, how well is the outside? How properly graded is it? Do I have downspouts?
Right.
Do I have drain tile? Are they clogged? And there's so many different things that come into the conversation. So, the easiest thing to do is just make sure it's a basement that was designed for this type of activity.
Yeah.
But if it's not, and you still want to use it as like into an office, then do as little as you possibly can to make it comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is, don't be putting up drywall and studs and brand new carpeting and new drop ceiling and all this stuff, because eventually, if you haven't actually solved the moisture issue, you're going to have a major, major mold problem, and you'll wish you never did it.
Yeah.
So if you do need to make it an office, use a dry lock on the walls. On the floors, I would keep it raw concrete and maybe use some type of a synthetic low chemical area rug. Make sure everything's breathable. Use a dehumidifier. Again, make it as comfortable as you can without causing more problems.
Right. Don't lock up something that you're going to later find out has some bad things going on behind it.
Yeah.
Like mold, for example.
Exactly.
Well,
right.
That is a good one. So here's the last one I have. This is from someone closer to you, Andy. This is coming from Mankato, Minnesota. Mankato, nice. Where my mother grew up. This is from Barry. Barry, it's kind of a similar thing here. Barry is saying, my wife and I are downscaling, looking to build a tiny house.
Yes.
It's a very popular idea these days. Since we have no experience in building from scratch, what should we prioritize going forward? By the way, love the podcast.
Awesome. Thank you, Barry.
Thanks, Barry.
Thank you. Okay, so you've never built before, and you're building a tiny house. So I'm sure
I got an answer for it right away. I got an answer.
What's that?
She just hire you. They could hire you.
There you go.
Hey, sorry, folks. Had to make a pitch for my partner here.
Well, I appreciate that. But I'll say this. I've not said it before.
Yeah.
Tiny houses, big problems. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. You try to put in all of the same equipment, all the same creature comforts, everything you have in a larger home into a smaller footprint, which means more of a chance of things to go wrong on a grander scale. You would think a big house would have bigger problems. Actually, that's not true. Tiny house has bigger problems because you have two people living in a 4,000 square foot home, two people living in a 400 square foot tiny home. You're still showering, bathing, washing dishes. We all perspire throughout the day and the night.
Yeah.
All this is still happening in the house. So it leads to bigger IAQ issues and mold problems.
I think you're touching on something really important, because I think there's all kinds of people understanding what tiny home means. Tiny home means like what you're saying, a 400 square foot house. And then there are tiny homes that are much larger than that. I've seen a house called a tiny home that's 1,500 square feet.
Sure.
So I think that's important what you said. And that is, you have to know how you've lived. And if you're living in a 4,000 square foot home, you cannot go too small, because if you do, you're going to be, what you're alluding to is you're going to be trying to put in things for creature comforts. You're going to squeeze it. You're going to have all kinds of challenges,
right? Because
you're trying to live large in a small space,
right?
So you have to recognize, okay, we've lived large. We want to cut back. We only have two of us. The kids are out of the house, but we don't want to lose any of the comfort. So you have to kind of adjust what you mean when you say, I want to go small.
Exactly right. And you also have to, and this would help. And again, we get these questions and the way they come in, we just take them as we get them.
Right.
But the more detail we can get, the better. So when you say you want to build a tiny house, does that mean you want to build a home on wheels?
Uh-huh.
A lot of these tiny houses are essentially just RVs.
Right.
Or travel trailers.
Right.
Although I work with people who build tiny houses out of shipping containers that are
Correct.
built on a slab,
Correct.
right? They're not mobile.
Mm.
So if it's one of the mobile versions, then you really have to spend a lot of time engineering and constructing the floor to be resistant to everything that a travel trailer floor will be subject to, moisture wise.
Mhm.
If you're building it as a traditional home, but just smaller, it's a little bit easier. But spend more time working on air purification, HVAC in general, than you think you would, because this is usually where the problems end up happening, is that people aren't getting good quality fresh air, or it's not being purified. You do end up with a mold problem somewhere because moisture is a factor.
Mhm.
Yes, you can work with myself or others around the country who specialize in building, but again, the other thing is, you check with your local building codes. Minnesota in particular has some pretty stringent energy codes
Sure.
for all new construction. So if it's being built on a piece of land that's going to be a residence, you've got to build it to code. And they have, like I said, some very, very strict energy codes that will preclude you from doing some things that you may want to do. If you're building this as a mobile, then that may not be the case.
Yeah, yeah. So they are, and there are companies out there that you can contact that will kind of help you walk through
Yes.
the process. Many of these companies already have models, and basically you buy a model and you just upgrade it as you can afford it.
Yes.
And they come in different sizes. I was actually exploring that myself for our backyard. We have a fairly large piece of land, and the city of San Diego now has opened up the door for what's called ADUs.
Yes.
So we can build on the back of our property, and we don't have any real issues now that we used to in the past. But there are companies that can help you, guide you through that.
There are.
There's a lot of people, because of everything that's going on. There are people that are doing the mobile small house, whether it's on wheels, right?
Right.
And so I think all your points there are really well taken in terms of getting the right idea. I always tell people, listen, do a lot of research, do a lot of due diligence, talk to experts like Andy and others who can kind of give you a footprint to follow, a kind of a guideline to follow. It's so worth it, people. Don't try to do this on your own if you have no experience. There's a lot of good people out there that can really give you good guidance and help you get what you want, save you some money maybe at the same time. And of course, as what we're all about is being able to live as healthfully as possible, whether it's a tiny house or it's a mansion on the hill. Right. That's the whole point. So why don't we call
I've got to just put on there, Jay, that one of my clients that I've been working with the past year, Patricia in Scottsdale.
Yeah.
She and her husband went through the planning stage and the building stage of building an ADU.
Okay.
An accessory dwelling unit.
Correct.
On their property. And it's because he has such sensitivities. He has such medical issues.
Yeah.
And he needed essentially a place to go to, a
sanctuary,
safe zone, right? If something happened during the day, can't tolerate what's in the main house, he's got a place he can go into that he knows it's his space and nobody else is going to be tainting that space. It was built according to our specifications. And it turned out beautifully. I'm really excited for them. And I know they're looking forward to it. Matter of fact, I talked to them last week. It was our last call before their annual contract was up. And Patricia said, we could not have done this without you, because we don't know what questions to ask. We're working with experts who build energy efficient ADUs. They know nothing about human health. And so, it's just interesting how I've had a number of clients now with these building these small ADUs, these accessory units,
Mm.
to be like safe houses, safe rooms,
Yeah.
and it's becoming more popular for sure.
Yeah.
I would say in the last 6 months, I've had a lot less people calling about remodeling their Sprinter van into a healthy Sprinter van.
Yeah.
I just, it's kind of cyclical. That may come back.
Mhm.
But the pandemic has done one thing for the world that is incredibly positive.
Mhm.
And so I was last night. I had a podcast interview for a show down in Australia. Alex Stewart with Low Tox Life, and she's just amazing what she's doing down there, and she got some stuff out of me that I don't think anybody has ever asked the right questions to get. So I'm looking forward to this episode being published in the next probably month or two. But we talked about some really deep conversation about things and came to the conclusion that the pandemic will come down in 20 years from now. We're going to look at the pandemic as the time when everything changed for the good.
Mhm.
People are worried about their environment. People are worried about the spaces they live in. People are very concerned about anything that has to do with viruses, bacteria, and mold. And because of that, they're worried about anything new that comes into their house. And so we're seeing the signs of it now. We're hearing the words, we're getting the questions emailed to us. This will come down to the moments in our tiny little industry of healthy homes that completely changed the narrative.
Wow.
And so I can say without question, I have never been more excited to be in this industry, because I think that in the last 30 years, we've had some pockets of time where I go, now we're really on the cutting edge. Now this is really going to take off. I see this is taking off.
Yeah.
This for sure is the most exciting time. And
Wow.
if you are at that moment in your life where you're going to be remodeling, building, what have you, you have never had a better time to be looking for materials, asking these questions, finding those professionals, because again, it's just, there's more people involved, there's more people asking, and therefore the manufacturers are starting to respond.
Yeah, there's so much great energy around it. I agree with you 100%. Just going back a little bit, what you said about creating a safe home for your customers in Arizona, there's something so fundamentally important about that, because if you're psychically walking into a space that you feel threatened, all the bells and whistles go off. All of them go off, and then you start to have those symptoms. So when you know that you can go to a place that's a sanctuary, that's safe, that is doing your immune system a whole lot of good. It's like giving your immune system vitamins. It's like fortifying your immune system, because now you have some place that you don't have that fear factor jump in there and create this. Back in the old days, Andy, you remember, it was like if you were chemically sensitive and admitted it, everyone thought you were insane. Your doctor didn't know how to deal with it. You had to go to your psychiatrist. But we know that this chemical sensitivity and related symptoms are all about mind-body awareness.
Yes.
The mind and the body, they go together. So it's not just a mental problem, it's a physical problem, and you can't divorce one from the other. So I love that about what you said about him feeling like, hey, I have a safe place. He knows every day, no matter what happens, he's got some place to go. And that's what we all want. We all want that kind of sanctuary. We
all want that. And we all hope it could just be our home.
Right.
And we all hope that maybe where we work will also be a safer space.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Think about that. We probably spend more time at the office than we do at home.
Yeah. Right.
At least I know I do.
Go home, will you? Hey, listen,
right.
But make sure you put in the show notes about this podcast that's going to come up with you in Australia, because I think everyone's going to want to listen to that. I want to listen to it.
Well, Jay, it went so well. We already planned part 2.
Oh, good.
And part 2 is going to be great, because we're going to go through the entire process of building from start to finish.
Nice.
Just talk about things to look out for.
Okay. That's great. That's great. Yeah. I think everyone listening to that would want to hear that. I want to, and I know everyone else will. Andy, It's been great talking to you again. I know
It
it's been
has.
a little space between podcasts, but I saw that our interview with Paula Baker Laporte is up now, and so people have a chance to listen to that. That was a good session, and I know there's going to be other ones coming down the pipeline. You've probably got some interviews in mind. I'll have some interviews in mind, and
Well, I was at a show in recently, the nation's largest interior design show for commercial,
where was that?
down in Chicago.
Okay.
It's called NeoCon.
Oh, NeoCon, right.
And I interviewed 7 or 10 people over the course of a day and a half. And when I get a chance to go through it all, I think some of that will make a really good podcast episode because, again, because of the pandemic, manufacturers worldwide have taken on the necessity to get rid of microbials in the workspace. So I talk to tile companies, I talk to flooring manufacturers, paint manufacturers. I talk to an Italian leather company that uses silver ions in the leather manufacturing process to eliminate mold and bacteria on the surface of their leather chairs.
Wow.
This is becoming commonplace now.
Yeah.
So I'll definitely be bringing that information out as time goes on.
Awesome.
Jay, have yourself a wonderful weekend. You're going to be going on vacation for a while.
Yep.
Have a good time. Enjoy. Come home safe, and we will talk to everybody soon.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Take care of yourself.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.